Life with my family was simple and predictable. My wife, Barbara, and I had built a life together over the years, one that included 2 young children, a cozy home, and a daily rhythm that kept things steady. We were a typical suburban family, school runs, weekend outings, the occasional date night. Yet lately, something felt off. Barbara, once so present and engaged, seemed distant. Her smiles were more forced, her responses more clipped, and the warmth that used to be in her eyes seemed to have faded. I brushed it off at first, convincing myself that stress from work or parenting was taking its toll on her. But deep down, a subtle, unsettling feeling gnawed at me. I couldn't pinpoint exactly what had changed, but the tension in the air was palpable. It was as if something was silently shifting beneath the surface, and I couldn't figure out what it was. I tried to push the unease aside, but it was always there, lingering just out of reach. It wasn't anything overt at first, just small things that didn't sit right. Barbara started coming home later, sometimes hours after she was supposed to be back from work or her weekly yoga class. When she did come home, there was a slight distance in her eyes, as if her mind was elsewhere. Her phone, once something we both casually glanced at, now seemed to be constantly in her hand, and she'd often step out of the room to answer calls, her voice dropping to a hushed tone I couldn't quite make out. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she was just caught up with work or talking to a friend. But then there were the little things. She'd avoid my gaze during conversations, a coldness creeping into her touch, her laughter not quite reaching her eyes. I started to feel paranoid, wondering if something had changed between us, though I couldn't bring myself to ask her outright. The sense that something was off began to grow, and though I couldn't quite put my finger on it, a deep, unsettling suspicion began to form that something was happening behind the scenes, something I was being kept in the dark about. I didn't act on my suspicions right away, but one afternoon while chatting with a neighbor, the idea of home security came up. He mentioned installing cameras to keep an eye on the house while his family was away. Nothing too extreme, just a way to ensure safety. It was an innocent enough suggestion, but something about it stuck with me. That night, as I scrolled through my phone, I came across an ad for home security cameras. I hadn't considered it before, but the thought suddenly seemed logical. Maybe it was just for peace of mind, I thought. Barbara and the kids were home more often these days, and with a break-in nearby, I reasoned that it was only smart to be cautious. The idea grew into something more than just security. Maybe if I could see what was really happening in the house, I could get to the bottom of my feelings. Without discussing it with Barbara, I ordered a set of cameras. I installed them quietly. One in the living room, another near the entrance, then a few others to cover the hallways. I felt a strange mix of relief and discomfort. It was just for safety, right? I wasn't really questioning her, was I? Yet deep down I knew the truth. I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to know more. For a few days after the cameras were installed, everything seemed normal. Life went on in its usual rhythm. Barbara came home at her usual times. The kids fought over toys, and we settled into our evening routine. But even as everything appeared unchanged, I couldn't help but notice subtle moments that felt different. Barbara seemed more engrossed in her phone than ever, occasionally smiling at something that made her laugh quietly. But when I asked about it, she'd quickly change the subject. The air between us was thick with something unsaid, but I told myself I was overthinking it. Perhaps I was just too focused on the little things. The cameras remained unnoticed by her, and I let myself believe I was just being paranoid. Yet, each day my discomfort grew a little more. I tried to push it down, focusing on work and the kids, but it lingered, refusing to be ignored. It was on a Tuesday, while Barbara was out running errands, that I decided to check the footage for the first time. I hadn't expected to see anything out of the ordinary, just the usual quiet footage of a normal household. But then, there he was, a man I didn't recognize stepping through the front door. He moved with an air of familiarity, like someone who belonged in our home. My heart skipped a beat as I watched him, unsure of what I was seeing. He seemed comfortable, even laughing with Barbara as they greeted each other. The way they interacted, too relaxed, too friendly, made a knot tighten in my stomach. It wasn't a fluke. This man wasn't just a repairman or a delivery person. He knew Barbara, and he was in our home when I wasn't there. I watched as they spoke for a while, and then he left, disappearing out of view. My first instinct was to brush it off, to tell myself it was nothing. Maybe he was an old friend. Maybe I was just reading too much into it. But a sick feeling began to settle in my chest. Something didn't sit right. A few days later, I couldn't resist checking the footage again. Maybe I was overreacting, but I needed to see if there was more to the story. And sure enough, the man was back. This time, he lingered longer. They were sitting close together on the couch, laughing, exchanging casual touches that felt more intimate than friendly. My heart raced as I watched the discomfort swelling into something darker. They weren't just friends. The way they interacted, the way he looked at her, it was too familiar, too personal. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I didn't need more footage to confirm it. Something was going on between them. The man wasn't just a passing acquaintance. He was a presence in our home, and his relationship with Barbara was something deeper. I felt a mix of anger, confusion, and betrayal. An overwhelming sense of helplessness washed over me. I wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but a part of me wanted to know more. I needed the truth, even if it would destroy me. The more I saw, the more obsessed I became with uncovering the full truth. I had to know everything. The cameras I'd installed had given me some answers, but it wasn't enough. I needed more angles, more details. I ordered additional cameras, placing them strategically in the bedroom and living room, areas where I could get the clearest view of their interactions. Every time I checked the footage, my unease grew. It wasn't about protecting my home anymore. It was about uncovering the full extent of Barbara's betrayal. With each passing day, I sank further into this obsession, unable to stop myself. I knew I was crossing a line, but I didn't care. I needed to know what was happening, even if it shattered everything. One evening after Barbara had gone to bed, I decided to check the bedroom footage. I wasn't prepared for what I saw. The man entered the room, and it was unmistakable. They were intimate. The shock hit me like a wave, and my chest tightened with an unbearable weight. My hands trembled as I watched, unable to tear my eyes away from the screen. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some harmless flirtation. It was an affair. The finality of it settled over me, crushing me with the weight of the truth. All the signs, all the whispers of doubt. I'd known deep down, but seeing it in front of me was like a punch to the gut. I couldn't breathe. Betrayal felt like a living thing, twisting its way into my heart. My mind raced, but I couldn't think clearly. The image of them together burned itself into my mind, a painful reminder of everything I had lost. The next morning, I didn't know what to say. I was numb, my thoughts swirling, but I knew I had to confront her. As Barbara prepared breakfast, I asked her to sit down. The tension was unbearable, but I kept my voice steady, calm. She looked at me, confused, maybe even a little anxious, but I saw the flicker of recognition in her eyes. She knew. "What's going on, Barbara?" I asked quietly. Her eyes widened, and she stammered out a confused answer. I didn't give her the chance to lie. I showed her the footage, each painful moment of her betrayal captured on screen. She tried to deny it at first, offering weak excuses, telling me it was a mistake, that it wasn't what it looked like. But I saw the truth in her eyes. She wasn't sorry. She was just trying to save herself. The room grew thick with tension as I expressed my hurt and disbelief, feeling the ground beneath me shift. The woman I thought I knew was a stranger, and I didn't know how to process the betrayal that had shattered everything we'd built together. Barbara's pleas for forgiveness were relentless, but they fell on deaf ears. She begged me to understand, to let her explain. But nothing she said mattered. The trust we had shared was gone, replaced by the cold reality of her actions. I didn't believe her. I couldn't. The damage had been done, and I wasn't sure how to put the pieces back together. I told her I was leaving. There was no point in staying in a home that no longer felt like mine. The emotional toll was immense, and as I packed my things, the weight of the decision crushed me. But deep down, I knew I had made the only choice I could. I couldn't stay in a broken relationship, not when everything I had trusted had been destroyed. Leaving was the easy part. What came next was harder. I filed for divorce, and with a strange clarity, I began the process of moving on. I sought legal advice, hiring a private investigator to find out more about the man Barbara had been seeing. The truth was worse than I could have imagined. He was someone connected to our family, a colleague of mine. The betrayal cut even deeper. But once I knew the truth, there was no turning back. I had made my decision, and I wasn't going to let this man and his lies control my life any longer. Divorce proceedings were long and painful, but I kept moving forward. Shared custody of the kids was difficult, and there were moments of emotional upheaval, but I was determined to rebuild. Life post-divorce was far from easy, but it was necessary. I focused on healing, on becoming the best version of myself for the sake of my children. I knew that in time, the pain would fade. And though the past would always linger, I was stronger for it. This was my new beginning.